Good morning, distinguished guests, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning and welcome. Welcome to Central Asia. Welcome to the land which in the past was home to so many outstanding thinkers. For example, Muhammad ibn Musa al-Khwarizmi, who wrote a book called Al-Jabr, and therefore is regarded as the father of algebra, was born in Khwarazm, which is now part of Turkmenistan and Uzbekistan. Or else, Ibn Sina, the author of the Canon of Medicine, commonly known under his Latinized name Avicenna, was born near Bukhara, in modern-day Uzbekistan. The fame of Abu Nasr Muhammad al-Farabi, whose name is now proudly carried by the Kazakh National University and a big avenue in Almaty, is shared by several Central Asian nations. This region was home to numerous significant historical events and developments. Think, for example, of the Battle of Talas, which took place in 751 between the Chinese and Arab armies near the border between present-day Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan. According to some historians, Chinese prisoners captured in that battle introduced paper manufacturing to Samarkand. After that, the first paper mill was built in Baghdad, and the production of paper started throughout the Muslim world. Think about the significance of these developments for the world for a second. Much more importantly, in addition to its rich military history, Central Asia served as a location for several important peacemaking initiatives and developments. Think about the Tashkent Declaration of the 10th of January 1966, which was signed by India's Prime Minister Lal Bahadur Shastri and Pakistan's President Muhammad Ayub Khan to end the Indo-Pakistani War of 1965. More recently, in 1988-1989, the Soviet troops withdrawing from Afghanistan transited through the territory of Uzbekistan. And the Afghanistan-Uzbekistan Friendship Bridge, which had initially served as a military supply route, is now used for peacetime communication between the two nations. On the 21st of December 1991, the city of Almaty, where we are now, hosted a forum of leaders of 11 post-Soviet nations, which reaffirmed that the Soviet Union had ceased to exist and established the Commonwealth of Independent States. Think about it for a second. The city of Almaty is the birthplace of the post-Soviet world. Just a few days ago, the ministers of foreign affairs of Armenia and Azerbaijan met here in Almaty to discuss the future relations between their countries. And now, ladies and gentlemen, our conference is taking place here to reflect on the past, present, and future of international law in Asia. I do hope that by now you agree that Central Asia, and in particular Almaty, are the right places to discuss international law, and I wish all of us a very productive conference. With your permission, I will now take some time to show some of Central Asia's modern achievements in international law, but also to highlight some unresolved issues. We do have results that we are proud of. At the same time, we are looking for answers to a few questions, and I will point to some of these. During the Soviet period, the Central Asian states, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan, were only nominally sovereign. In 1991, they became full-fledged members of the international community of states, and in the past 33 years, international law has been instrumental in dealing with regional political and legal challenges, such as border issues, regional security, drug trafficking, human trafficking, disputes over water, and international terrorism. International law has also been fundamental for the consolidation of newly independent state sovereignty amid the competing interests of China, Russia, the United States, and the European Union in the region. Yet, local populations and even some legal professionals and policymakers are still largely unaware of the norms and documents of international law and their implications for domestic legal orders. Based on these realities, I will argue that international law deserves an even more prominent role in Central Asia. At first glance, the international legal profession appears to have an important status all over the region, since formally international law is recognized as a source of law in all Central Asian states. All constitutions in the region contain provisions to the effect, and all Central Asian states have enacted laws on treaties, which largely reflect the Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties. But let me now turn from theory to practice. I will now share with you some of the most significant initiatives and achievements attained by Central Asian states in the field of international law, and will also point to some concerns. These observations will later serve as a basis for some concluding observations and policy recommendations. The states of Central Asia have proposed several important international security initiatives. To name just a few, in chronological order. In December 1995, the General Assembly of the United Nations reaffirmed the permanent neutrality of Turkmenistan, which was subsequently reflected in Article 2 of the Constitution of Turkmenistan. Notably, not only is Turkmenistan the only state in Central Asia with a status of permanent neutrality, but its constitution is also unique in Central Asia in that it makes direct reference to the United Nations. Further, in 1997, Tashkent hosted an international conference entitled Central Asia, a Zone Free of Nuclear Weapons, after which the Central Asian Nuclear Weapon Free Zone Treaty was signed in September 2008, and following ratification by all Central Asian states, entered into force in March 2009. Central Asia has thus become one of the world's 5 nuclear weapon-free zones. The man you're seeing on the slide is a famous Kazakhstani painter, Karibek Kuyukov. He was born in a small village in Kazakhstan, just 97 kilometers from a site where the Soviet Union carried out 468 nuclear tests. And as you see, he was born without arms. And he paints holding brushes with teeth and with toes. And this is why he is an active champion in the international movement against nuclear weapons. In 2010, Kazakhstan was the first Central Asian and post-Soviet state to chair the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. And on the 10th of December 2012, the concept of the foreign political activity of the Republic of Uzbekistan was promulgated by the first president of Uzbekistan. In line with this concept, Uzbekistan suspended its membership in the Collective Security Treaty Organization in 2012. Notably, membership in the CSTO could not prevent several armed confrontations between Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan, and this probably suggests that the CSTO peacemaking machinery merits further fine-tuning. As one of Afghanistan's closest neighbors, Uzbekistan hosted 3 high-level conferences on regional security cooperation in 2018, on challenges and opportunities for Central and South Asia in 2021, and an international conference on Afghanistan took place in Tashkent in July 2022. As was reported by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Uzbekistan, the main goal of the event was to develop a set of measures and proposals for the world community to promote stability, security, and post-conflict reconstruction in Afghanistan. At present, the maintenance of peace and security in the region depends on the successful management of multiple security concerns and on cooperation both among the Central Asian states and between them and powerful external actors, such as China, Russia, North America, and the European Union. International law plays a central role in these processes, in that since 1991, regional security alliances have been formed, foreign military bases have been established in Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan and dismantled, also in Kyrgyzstan and Uzbekistan, An armed conflict took place in Tajikistan, and situations of violence have taken place in Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, and Uzbekistan, raising serious human rights concerns. And significant efforts have been made to combat international terrorism and transnational organized crime. The problems of corruption, energy, and international supply chains are further factors to be taken into account in the complex mosaic of regional security. The Central Asian states have been cooperating with universal international organizations since the early years of independence. At that time, it was both a matter of prestige and a way of manifesting their newly acquired state sovereignty, and the ensuing cooperation between universal international organizations and their members in Central Asia has yielded valuable results. All Central Asian states were admitted to the United Nations on the 2nd March 1992 and are also members of the UN specialized agencies, such as UNESCO and others. The early years of Tajikistan's independence were marked by a violent, non-international armed conflict, and the United Nations peace-building efforts were important. In 1995, Turkmenistan, as we already know, had its permanent neutrality recognized by the UN General Assembly, and in 2007, the United Nations Regional Center for Preventive Diplomacy for Central Asia was established in the capital of Turkmenistan, Ashgabat. In 2017 and 2018, Kazakhstan was a non-permanent member of the UN Security Council and used this important status, among other things, to promote its campaign against nuclear weapons, to raise international awareness of the security situation in and around Afghanistan, and to consolidate its role in the UN peacekeeping operations. Since 1991, several regional organizations have been established in which Central Asian members play key roles. You already know about the Commonwealth of Independent States. Next, the Collective Security Treaty Organization, the CSTO, grew out of a collective security treaty which was signed in Tashkent, Uzbekistan in May 1992. 10 years later, in May 2002, the treaty was transformed into an intergovernmental organization whose statute was approved in October 2002 and registered at the UN Secretariat next year. In 2004, the CSTO was granted observer status at the UN General Assembly, and current members of the CSTO include Armenia, Belarus, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Russia, and Tajikistan. And as you remember, Uzbekistan suspended its membership in 2012. On the 15th of June 2001, Kazakhstan, China, Kyrgyzstan, Russia, Tajikistan, and Uzbekistan announced the establishment of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. The SCO Charter was adopted in June 2002 and entered into force in September 2003. As of 2024, SCO has 8 member states. The founding members plus India and Pakistan, both admitted in 2017, making it the world's largest regional intergovernmental organization in terms of territory and population. The SCO regional anti-terrorist structure is located in Tashkent. For its part, the Eurasian Economic Union is a regional economic organization with elements of supranational competences. The Treaty on the Eurasian Economic Union entered into force on the 1st of January 2015, and the current members are Armenia, Belarus, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Russia. In December 2020, Uzbekistan and Cuba were granted observer status at the Eurasian Economic Union. However, I submit that the number and intensity of the challenges currently facing Central Asia are calling for even closer regional integration. Well, Turkmenistan's visa policy is very strict, including with respect to nationals of Central Asian states. As already mentioned, unresolved border issues have led to armed conflicts between Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan. Water scarcity is another problem which, if unresolved, will aggravate the situation in the future. The Aral Sea environmental disaster has been affecting the region for decades. These and other issues could be resolved more effectively if all Central Asian states were to make even more concerted efforts. I mean, indeed, the establishment of a Central Asian Union in the future. A major step in the regional integration process was in July 2022, when the presidents of Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan and Uzbekistan signed a treaty on friendship, good neighborliness and cooperation for the development of Central Asia in the 21st century. If the Central Asian Union project ever materializes, I'm confident that it will contribute to the region's sustainable development and to the welfare of all Central Asian societies. Central Asia's major environmental problem, indeed one of global significance, is the man-made desertification of the Aral Sea. The Soviet government's irrigation policies have led to devastating effects on the environment, public health, and the economy. In 1993, the International Foundation to Save the Aral Sea was founded. Since 1994, 3 Aral Sea basin programs have been implemented with financial support from various countries: the United Nations Development Programme, the World Bank, the United States Agency for International Development, the Asian Development Bank, and others. Moreover, UNESCO supported several scientific projects to develop policy recommendations and capacity building. As you see, the problem of Central Asia's water security reaches far beyond the region and is multidimensional in that it calls for ecological, economic, technical, healthcare, and other solutions. At this stage, a credible opportunity would be the conclusion of a convention on the Aral Sea by the states of the region, with the option of other states and international organizations joining at a later stage. The convention would be based on relevant scientific data, place limits on the use of the Amu Darya and Sirdarya rivers for irrigation and other purposes, regulate cooperation in the area of healthcare, the economy, and environmental protection, and establish an international expert monitoring mechanism. Although obviously not an easy undertaking, the project would result in tangible economic, environmental, and humanitarian results in Central Asia and beyond. The Central Asian states are all parties to the key human rights instruments. In 2008, the Office of the High Commissioner on Human Rights for Central Asia was established in Bishkek, Kyrgyzstan. It covers all Central Asian states except Uzbekistan. Windows of opportunity for improving the human rights situation in some of the Central Asian states opened up a few years ago, but much work remains to be done. Most notably, Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan announced ambitious law enforcement reforms. With due regard to recent developments in Uzbekistan, The Economist, the journal, stated in December 2019 that no other country has advanced that far and named Uzbekistan the country of the year. In order to reinforce this trend and to improve the quality of human rights processes in the region, above all, the independence of the judiciary should be strengthened. To achieve this, judges and law enforcement officials at the local and central levels ought to be trained on international human rights instruments, with the participation of the UN and academics. Where this has not been done, citizens should be given access to the constitutional courts. Regular dialogue between the states and human rights NGOs would also be worthwhile. To sum up, the time seems to be right for Central Asian countries to realize that compliance with international human rights law is not harmful to the state and will, in the language of Uzbekistan's new human rights strategy, contribute to further strengthening the country's authority in the international arena, in particular to improving the position of the state in economic, political, and legal rankings and indices. End of quote. There have been some notable developments pertaining to international investment arbitration in Central Asia. All states of the region, except Turkmenistan, are parties to the 1958 New York Convention on the recognition and enforcement of foreign arbitral awards. The 1966 ICSID Convention has been ratified by Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan. Kyrgyzstan signed the ICSID Convention in 1995, and Tajikistan is not a signatory state. Domestic legislation on international arbitration is in place in all Central Asian nations. It is important that in 2015, Kazakhstan adopted a constitutional law on the Astana International Financial Center. For his part, on the 5th of November 2018, the President of Uzbekistan signed a decree establishing the Tashkent International Arbitration Center, TIAC. I suppose that over time, the Tashkent International Arbitration Center could become a viable alternative to the AIFC, depending on the development of the business climate in both countries. Very importantly, I suggest that leading law schools in Central Asia, given these developments, could introduce courses on alternative dispute resolution, both at the undergraduate and graduate levels, in cooperation with leading domestic and international law firms and arbitral institutions. And now, dear colleagues, let me proceed to some concluding observations and recommendations. Although international law is formally a source of law in all states of Central Asia, its potential seems to be somewhat underexploited. To bring about constructive change, a few measures could be taken. First of all, it is commendable that all Central Asian states have already enacted foreign policy concepts where the specific role of international law in foreign policy is discussed. Among other things, these policy documents provide for an ongoing political dialogue on threats to peace and security in Central Asia, propose workable solutions based on international law, and will hopefully contribute to closer regional integration, which might ultimately lead to the establishment of a Central Asian Union. Second, a regular expert dialogue between the community of international law scholars and the Central Asian states will be useful. It is suggested that ministries of foreign affairs ought to more systematically involve international law scholars in drafting and providing expert opinions on treaties, other texts of international law and relevant acts of domestic law. The ministries would thus benefit from academic expertise, and academics could enrich their teaching with empirical data. Strategically, the Central Asian states might also consider nominating competent national academics for membership in the International Law Commission. Crucially, regular in-service training on international law could be provided to experts working in the legal departments of various ministries, parliaments, and national human rights institutions. This would expose them to the applicable international standards and help implement such standards in the relevant domestic legal acts and practices. Judges and law enforcement officials should also receive in-service training on international law, as this would help improve the quality of law enforcement and ultimately reduce the number of complaints submitted against the respective states to international human rights monitoring bodies. The teaching of international law at Central Asia's universities should relate to those challenges in the region which international law could help address. International law would thus be contextualized, which would cultivate a sense of social responsibility among the current students of international law. More local textbooks on international law in national languages, in English and in Russian, ought to be produced. Such textbooks would raise and discuss regional issues, propose suitable solutions, and help develop the international law terminology in Central Asian languages. Finally, international law scholars in Central Asia ought to develop and maintain academic dialogue with colleagues in various parts of the world, and consider joining international scholarly associations such as the Asian Association of International Law. Crucially, Central Asian international law scholars should submit more articles to reputed international law journals and participate in international research projects to make their respective doctrines better known abroad, and thus gradually to integrate the Central Asian schools of international law into the international academic community. Dear colleagues, let me stop here. Having shared with you some of our achievements and concerns, I look forward to discussing these issues with you, to sharing our experiences and to learning from you. I wish all of us a very successful and productive 2 days. Thank you very much for your attention.